What you gonna do? Huh? What you gonna do?
Hello there, dear viewers! Welcome back to Oblivion Class Restoration Project, where we combine minimal modding with maximal OP, although we may face some difficulties in the OP department this time around, because this is the Nightlade, and Oblivion Nightblades had no armor skill, so no smithing in Skyrim for me, no illusion, which is weird. You'd think it should be their primary, and the lack of crafting skills in particular made me cry. I'm fine now, I'm not crying anymore, shut up! I also don't think I can top my sword mage in terms of power. That's simply impossible, without downloading power from Nexus at least. So, I had a different idea. Let's actually make a very cost-effective Nightblade, relying almost entirely on novice and apprentice spells. Well, almost. I had to make some exceptions, but with the initiate perk and some amplified distraction, the novice spells remained mighty useful all the way through the playthrough. That's weird. I was also able to use Ghost Walk, which I can't believe is the best illusion spell ever, for free. No perks in illusion required. And with my lightweight armor pieces, I was able to squeeze some usefulness out of almost perkless sneak skill. Well, almost. I perked the rolling perks, which are mighty important for this build. There will be just so much rolling around.
Please, enlighten me. What is this ancient technique you speak of?
They call it the roly-poly.
Yes, rolls are quite important, and I treat them as the closest thing we have in Skyrim to the Oblivion's acrobatics skill. The resulting playstyle is based primarily on speed of movement, cheap spells, and some planning ahead, some tactical approach. You use sneak not to kill exactly, but to approach any new area with some caution. Look where the mages and archers are to take them out first, then proceed with some ghost walk to get a surprise attack and teleport back to your initial position. Early game, you may pair it with muffle spell. After your first strike, you must remain focused and roll a lot, blink a lot with Ghost Walk, and run around while slowing everyone down with frost spells. The concept is a bit similar to my Hexblade build. You can go watch it if the combat style is your thing. Or my sword mage, of course, as well. Both builds will be linked in the description. But this one is much more cost-effective, much less grindy. You literally won't need any magicka increase other than the best mage hood you can buy at the College of Winter Hold. When you do some open face-to-face combat, you rely on frost spells improved remarkably by Vokrii and Odin, cheap frost spells that will combine nicely with each other and with your movement speed. Also wards. With Vokrii perks, even the greater ward costs 1 point of magicka per second, while offering a lot of protection. For the mods, we have Vokrii, Evenstar, Morningstar, Classic Classes and Birth Signs, Apocalypse, Triumvirate, Odin, and Honed Metal. Morningstar and Odin are not that essential, though you can go with Vanilla Breton if you prefer, and no Odin spells were actually in use per se, although the changes to frost spells from Odin may be quite helpful. Classic Classes and Birth Signs are only here to reduce our falling damage, because I found it quite nice and neat in combination with Ghost Walk to drop down, kill something, and then teleport back on your high position. So the absolute minimal requirement is 5 mods for this one, which I think is rather minimalistic, although honed metal, yeah, without it, it would be a little bit grindy. You may need to use Winter Sun's Zenithar warship to increase your unperked smithing and enchanting, because it's rather vital that we have at least 50% amplify destruction for this little fellow. Of course, there's also fashion.
Fashion!
I used modular clothing system to assemble my gear. It gave me a little bit of a headache with honed metal, because not all pieces from MCS are accepted by honed metal services apparently, so I had to do some unperked smithing and enchanting anyway. If you don't have to always play on Legendary, perhaps it's actually a better idea. Your call. Due to these problems, most of the video is recorded on Master, not on Legendary. The fights look cooler this way, don't judge me, okay? If you don't like my fashion choices, remember your armor, boots especially, need to be very lightweight for unperked sneak to be effective. Also, the ebony sword is retextured with believable weapons. It looks believable. The race of the build is the Breton. It's rather important to have Breton's magic resistance, because late game you will use the Apprentice Stone, which makes you more vulnerable to magic in Evenstar. So for the stone, go Lord first, then after you can cast your ward spells for 1 point of magicka per second, get at least 2 ranks of magic resistance, and the initiate perk in alteration, you can switch to Apprentice. Twice the magicka regeneration is worth the hassle, especially for characters relying on cheap spells. The attributes ratio is 2 health per 1 stamina. Early game you can put maybe 1 or 2 level ups in magicka, but enchantments should be enough. Just remember to have magicka potions on you in the early game. For the main skills we have Alteration, Restoration, Destruction, One-Handed and Sneak. In One-Handed we have a pretty obvious choice of all sword perks, Victory Rush and all power attack perks, including Valorous Charge, which we of course want to use with Silent Roll to attack from the shadows, getting critical damage, 50% more damage, and double the weapon damage from sneak attack all at once. Potentially, if you executed this leap attack successfully with the Nighblade Triumvirate spell active, you can, in the late game, deal over 800 damage in one swift strike. In the light armor skill, take Fit, Training and Keen Senses from the middle branch and the entire right branch, excluding Untouchable. Movement speed is fairly important for the combat style, but since we don't block, we will take unblocked hits quite often, and Untouchable stops working for a while after taking a hit. War Dancer, however, giving us 15% more damage until we get hit, is worth it. With the insane Nighblade Silent Roll Valorous Charge combo I just mentioned, we will get even more damage if the combo is our opening move. Evasive Sprint negates almost any damage when you sprint. With a dodge roll from Sneak, it means we can dodge all attacks, both in open combat and when crouching. And obviously, Stamina Regen of Agility is fairly important too. We will increase it further with enchantments. In Sneak, we only take the dodge perks, so 2 ranks of Silent Roll and Dodge Roll. In harder fights, you absolutely need to roll a lot. When using Ghost Walk spell mid-combat, for example, silent rolling away is a good method of losing your pursuers, even without any other sneak perks.
Fear the old roly-poly.
In Destruction, take all the Frost perks, Hellstorm and 1 rank of Rune Master. I also took all the ranks of Raw Power perk, increasing non-elemental spell damage. We only use 1 spell affected by this perk, the Nighblade spell. Raw Power can make our opening combo even more terrifying, but I consider the perk optional. You may choose to place these 3 points elsewhere. It is a bit much for 1 spell, I agree. The Frost perks, though, they will have a huge impact, so we are very fast and swift, and the fact that every single frost spell, including the novice ones, will slow down enemies and impose 15% weakness to frost is rather awesome, especially with a frost enchanted weapon. Chilling Frost does affect enchantments, which means with 2 ranks of the Battle Mage perk in Alteration, we are making our enemies 15% more vulnerable to our frost spells and 30% more to all our spells with attack of our sword. Meanwhile, our most frequently used spell, Fracture, we will improve with Spell Twine to make the targets of said spell more susceptible to weapon damage. The spell deals a little bit of damage for 3 seconds and can be exploded during that time for additional damage with another Frost spell or enchantment. So, every time we hit anything with a sword, we fortify the damage of Fracture by a lot. And then the spell makes our weapon damage better, so we hit again to make Fracture explode for approximately 120 damage. The spell is a novice spell, by the way, so we do all that for 0 magicka with Initiate. And also, we use Black Eyes, or rather Frost Damage Piercing, but I somehow always call it Black Eyes in my mind, on our sword instead of normal eyes to ignore any frost resistance. But that's a powerful combo number 2, which wouldn't be possible without the amazing alteration perks, so here they are. We will waste 1.4 mage armor here, but Initiate will be more than worth it. More on that in the spells section. And Battle Mage, obviously, you don't want a sword and spell build without it. I actually already explained what all these perks do to the build, because Alteration is so awesome in Vokrii I got a little bit ahead of myself, so let's move on. In Restoration, we may need Respite. Ebony swords are a tad heavy, you may occasionally run out of stamina, even with our more than decent regeneration, so it's probably a good choice. You may postpone it to the late game, after you already have the Battle Mage perk and some cool Frost perks. Because we are rather weak against mages, we need wards badly. Luckily, the Vokrii perks make them way more useful, and we will enhance them via Spell Twine, adding 15% magic resistance to our best ward. And the Novice Heal spell will be entwined with additional healing, so we only use 2 restoration spells, but they really count. Some paid training may be necessary for this skill. It will rise rather slowly for us. For the items, first and foremost, we need an ebony sword with frost damage piercing enchantment, aka Black Eyes. It ignores frost resistance. It's a godsend for this character. If you have some patience, you should find a good ebony sword like this on a high level Draugr sooner or later. If you don't have the patience, honed metal. Then we have the painstakingly assembled modular gear enchanted with honed metal services. Amplified destruction for our necklace and pants, stamina regen for our brigandine, fortify one-handed for ring and gauntlets, and fortify magicka for the hood. I went 1 slot over the vanilla limit because amplifying destruction was so absolutely fundamental for a build relying on cheap spells. So was stamina regeneration, and fortify one-handed is inevitable on higher difficulty levels, so I didn't really have much options. I still left quite a few unenchanted bits, like leather rear brace on my arms and Northman epaulets on my shoulders. The bit on my torso is called reinforced brigandine, and on my legs reinforced leather greaves. Everything was smoothed up with either honed metal or with unperked smithing and some elixirs, so all that with 100 armor rating from ebony flesh gave me almost maximum armor. A lot of the key spells have been mentioned already, but here is the list anyway. Ghostwalk will help you scout ahead. Ghostwalk will make you execute your leap attack and then immediately teleport back to your original position. I slaughtered battalions this way. And Fracture, as mentioned, works very well with your perks and your sword. Creeping Cold, a cheap apprentice spell, will slow people down and freeze them after you maintain it for 6 seconds. This is great because you will be very fast, so you can walk back when keeping the spell up just to wait them to freeze and then countercharge. You can pair it with Shadow Stride, increasing your movement speed. It's a novice spell, much like Ghostwalk and Fracture, so it's all available early and later in the game becomes free to cast. You know what else is a novice spell? Draining Touch. Yeah, I'm not sure what NI was thinking, but it's a spell draining magicka and health over time, and it's a novice spell. And it's not even actually touch, it works for quite some distance actually. Another great spell to mess with your enemies is Wither. I love it. It slows people down and reduces their damage output by 5% per second for 20 seconds. Given your movement speed and the fact that your frost spells will also slow them down considerably, you can toy with your enemies pretty much endlessly and viciously until you feel like going and fighting up close. For ranged damage, I opted for Frost Rune. It's also rather cheap, especially for its damage, and is quite useful when all the clumsy bandits are approaching you very slowly because you froze them and withered them. For the hardest fights, we have Freezing Strikes, preferably paired with Nighblade for the maximum OP. You noticed the lack of a Kato's recital? Yeah, I am evolving. So the resulting build is extremely agile, capable of building up some insane movement speed advantage by increasing his own speed and greatly reducing the speed of the enemies, relying on Frost, Shadow and Blade to tear through his enemies, teleporting around the field of battle, encasing foes in ice in more than one way, dodging and rolling and roll jumping and jump dodging and knocking them down with power attacks and even disarming them occasionally, and all that with some cheap spells and rather easily accessible enchantments. Yes, needless to say, I enjoyed it.
I enjoy carnage.
And you will enjoy it too, I hope, perhaps to the degree that would validate or indeed necessitate leaving a like and a comment down below. I mean, it doesn't have to be both, it can be one or the other, I'm not that greedy.
I am, love me.
Also subscribe and ring the bell, bells are fun. Okay, that's it for now, we will see each other again. Bye-bye.
In the immortal words of the ancient roly-poly Elder Lords, get gears, Scrub.
Oh, come on.